Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program produced and funded by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Ralph Eisler.
And I'm Larry Rhodes, and we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people committed to finding a life rooted in science and free of supernatural beliefs.
Okay, well, this is a call-in show, but we only have one phone line. So if you can't get through, we invite you to tweet us at FFTVKNOX. While we go over a few announcements, we invite you to start calling in now at the number on the screen. Get a pen and paper, and we'll give you our email address later in the show.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville as frequently has fun meetup groups or meetups at a bar and eatery in the Old City. Tonight's meetup is at Barley's in the Old City starting around 5:30 right after the show. Look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table. And as Matt Dillahunty at the Atheist Experience always says, everyone is welcome to our happy hour for food, drink, or conversation, but if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't.
Okay. The Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. The first and third Sundays are usually presentations with lively roundtable discussions. The second Sunday is a book club, and the fourth Sunday is usually a meeting in somebody's home that we call a reflections meeting. It's a little more intimate. It's potluck lunch, and you get to know a lot of people very well. So visit our websites for additional details, including times and locations.
We all are aware that Christian fundamentalists continue to try to impose their beliefs on society as a whole. One of the things that have caught our attention recently is their campaign to display the words, "In God We Trust," everywhere, even on public buildings. Now, this advertising slogan is the official motto of the United States, so it's difficult to make a legal case that such actions violate the Establishment Clause or the First Amendment. But today we want to discuss what the motto really means and whether it makes any sense. So as our title today's show of our show is, "In God We Trust," is not a statement, but a question. But before we get to these points, let's take a look at some items in the news.
Okay, well, obviously on this show we promote scientific approach to gaining knowledge because it's been so outstandingly successful, particularly within the last 150 years. And we often wonder why so many people reject the findings of science in favor of myths and legends that were created thousands of years ago by priests who were totally ignorant of how nature functions. So we were intrigued by a story that came out this week about a woman named Virginia Heffernan, who was formerly a New York Times culture and technology writer. She's openly declared that she is a creationist, but the intriguing part of this story is why.
Heffernan says that I found a more compelling story of our origins than the ones that involved, I'm sorry, she said she never found a more compelling story of our origins other than the ones that involve God. The first books of the Bible are still hanging around. I guess I don't believe that the world was created in a few days, but what do I know? It seems as plausible to me as a theoretical astrophysicist, and is certainly a livelier tale. She quotes Life of Pi author Jan Martella saying, 1, life is a story, 2, you can choose your story, and 3, a story with God is an even better story.
It seems pretty strange, but now Mrs. Heffernan is not a stupid person, but she seems to epitomize the Peter Pan mind. She doesn't want to grow up. Understanding science requires a little intellectual commitment. It's just easier to remain willfully ignorant and use the word God as a synonym for that ignorance. Some people never seem to be able to release their grip on children's fairy tales and graduate to detective novels. Anyone who thinks that conjurer in the skies pulling stars out of a magic hat makes for a better story than does the scientific journey unraveling the secrets of the cosmos may qualify as a kindergarten teacher, but certainly not as a technology writer.
And the very effrontery of saying you can choose your own story where science is concerned and the history of the universe, it's just arrogant.
Yeah.
The evidence points to one particular story, and if you've got evidence to the contrary, present it. But don't just say it's wrong and pick your own story and say that all of science is just wrong.
Well,
just because you say so.
Yeah, that's the trouble with a lot of people. They think truth is whatever they define it to be, whatever they think it is, whatever is true for them, okay?
How many times have I heard that particular phrase? It's true for me.
Right, exactly. And so you can't do much about that. Our main objection, of course, is when other people want to impose those truths on us. For instance, like the biblical creation stories, which are children's fairy tales. So,
we should go on and get back to our regular topic.
Yeah, I would just go on to our main topic, the nation motto, "In God We Trust." We may get back to some other things later in the program, but right now we'll do that.
Well, let me take just a second to remind everybody this is a call-in show. The line is open. You can call in any time from now on.
Yeah, and please do. And give us your questions or your comments. So, the phrase "In God We Trust" is being bandied about lately in several contexts. For a phrase that is a national motto of the United States of America, it occasions an inordinate amount of divisiveness between theists and secularists. The Christocrats try to use it as a bludgeon against those who uphold the First Amendment separation of church and state. So it has come into the news frequently. A couple of months ago, the Baptist churches in Anderson County convinced the county commission to place the phrase above the entry to the courthouse. And this last 4th of July, the religious fundamentalists who own the Hobby Lobby retail store chain actually published full-page advertisements in several national newspapers. They must have spent near fortune on those.
The Freedom from Religion Foundation ran their own counter advertisement, as you can see here. It's kind of a full-page double-sided, double spread, quoting the Founding Fathers, different secular quotes that counter the quotes of the Hobby Lobby.
Yeah.
But however, the Freedom from Religion Foundation doesn't have the financial resources to totally compete with a big business, especially one that has funding from the Christian right.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen their advertisement, you can find it on their website, which is ffrf.org. And in March, the Freedom from Religion Foundation and 19 other plaintiffs mounted a lawsuit against the United States Treasury Department and other government officials, claiming that they are discriminating against non-believers by including the phrase, "In God We Trust," in the nation's currency. It was illegal when they put it on there, and it's still illegal.
Yeah.
You can't use the president and say, well, we've always done it, when it was illegal to begin with.
Yeah.
So today,
saying it's tradition or something doesn't make it right.
Right. If it's against law, it's against law. So today we thought that we would discuss the motto, its history, and what does it really mean, whether a nation actually trusts in a God or whether it should do so.
Yeah, I even saw it on a Georgia license plate the other day. I guess it's not optional, but mandatory. I don't know if you can buy a plate without the slogan on it. I don't know. Okay, well, first a little history about this motto. The phrase appears to have originated in the Star-Spangled Banner, written by Francis Scott Key during the War of 1812. The fourth stanza includes the phrase, "And this be our motto, in God is our trust." And in 1861, the Reverend M.R. Watkinson, in a letter dated November 13th, 1861, petitioned the Treasury Department to add a statement recognizing Almighty God in some form on our coins. At least part of the motivation was to declare that God was on the Union side of the Civil War. Well, I can't dispute that one way or the other. The Union side did win the Civil War, but I'm not sure they won it because God was on their side, because the Confederates claimed he was on their side too.
And that he supported slavery.
Yeah, absolutely. So an act of Congress passed March 3rd, 1865. It allowed the Mint Director, with the Secretary's approval, to place the motto on all gold and silver coins that shall admit the inscription thereon. I don't know what that means. Maybe that we're large enough, have room to put it on. In 1873, Congress passed the Coinage Act, granting that the Secretary of the Treasury may cause the motto, "In God We Trust," to be inscribed on such coins as shall admit of the motto. It subsequently appeared and disappeared from various coins until 1956.
I'd like to make a point here that even in 1873, when the Congress passed the Coinage Act, that was nearly 100 years after the Founding Fathers came up with e pluribus unum, and we were using that as a de facto motto of the United States. And it's still basically the de facto model. You can pick up a quarter and look at it and still see e pluribus unum, which really fits the United States better. Out of many one, how many different cultures have we assimilated into the American dream or the project that we have made one great nation out of? If you try to take something like under God indivisible, when you put God in there, you start dividing people right away.
That's what I said earlier. It's the most divisive thing you could think of for a motto for a country that calls itself the United States. Right. E pluribus unum is a positive-looking motto.
Yeah. Of course, Benjamin Franklin wanted what? Mind your business?
Yeah, mind your business.
Again, 1956. Now remember, this is only, what, 60 years ago? The nation was at a particularly tense time in the Cold War. The United States wanted to distinguish itself from the non-religious Soviet Union. And as a result, the 84th Congress passed a joint resolution declaring "In God We Trust" the national motto of the United States. Again, it was illegal. It did not have a secular purpose. It was directly in support of religion over non-religion. The Congress had no business doing this. It was against the Constitution. The law was, however, signed by politicians, President Eisenhower on July 3rd, 56. The motto was progressively added to the paper money over a period of 1957 to 66. There's no doubt that Congress had the Christian God in mind and that the resolution was a violation of the First Amendment. There seems to be no thought as that this was an unconstitutional endorsement of religion by the federal government. I'm sure there were a few voices that were raised in opposition to this, but did they care?
No, I don't think they cared.
They wanted to prove that they were a Christian nation. Of course, they were pandering to the religious.
Absolutely. The religious right was using the tenor of the country to promote their agenda. Mm-hmm. And we have some people today, you can buy a little stamp actually that you can stamp on a dollar bill or $5 bill on the back that puts a circle with a slash on it for God. But some bright guy also has one that has the flying spaghetti monster on, if you want to put it there.
Yeah. And some cultures would put Buddha up there, or the multi-armed god of the Indian culture, whichever you want. But remember, God does not necessarily mean God of Christianity.
Okay, I think we have a call here. Okay. Hello, caller. Can you give us a name or a nickname?
Your friend Jeffrey.
Oh, here's Jeffrey.
Welcome, Jeffrey. Did you have a comment or question?
The God We Trust was enforced by the Joe McCarthy, the man noted for being the biggest liar in U.S. Senate history.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why he had to trust a lot in God, so he wouldn't get caught, I guess.
Yeah, in God We Trust, everyone else pays cash. I totally agree with that sentiment, by the way.
Yeah.
If the
and
reader...
you can still get dollar bills at a collector's agency that does not carry that in God We Trust.
If the
what use is God? I have no idea what use of God is. And here in Canada, we do not have your First Amendment to the Constitution. We do not have a separation of church and state. In fact, we have official religion. And our currency does not carry any reference to a God. You might point that out to the people who actually print up your money.
Yeah, but English, the Britons have it even better than we do. They have Darwin on their money. So that's about the best of all.
I think a lot of the problem might come from the fact that you do have separation, because the countries that have an official religion, the countries that have an official God, whatever, are the least religious countries in the world, like England, Norway, Sweden, even Germany.
Right.
Yeah, but I think that that's simply because that socially they've progressed a little farther along, and they just haven't gotten rid of it. And as you say, most people maybe don't care that much about it.
And that's quite a gamble when you give the government a particular religion or authorization to back a particular religion, that they won't just go head over heels after it and persecute all the other religions in the society.
It's not that they persecute, it's just that all these countries I just mentioned had a reigning monarch who had a religion. And whatever the monarch's religion was, that became the official religion.
Right.
So, Jeffrey, does religion play much of a role in politics in Canada?
Absolutely none. N-O-N-E.
Yeah.
None. Because the politicians who run for office here, if they start quoting God, they will be quickly ignored and immediately voted out of office.
If not...
Our politicians are notorious for not mentioning God whatsoever, not referencing any God. We have to find out from the internet and through rumors exactly if these people are religious or not religious.
I can't imagine.
That is the biggest difference between Canada and the U.S.
Wow. That's something, you know, it wasn't so many decades ago when mentioning your religion in public or making a big thing of it as a politician was just not done either. This is a phenomenon that's crept in more and more in the last few decades in the U.S.
I think it's your guy Jimmy Carter who was actually the first one who claimed that he was a devout Christian. He really made religious devotion part of a presidential political campaign. Before that, the politicians never mentioned God. They had no reference whatsoever, and a lot of them really were atheists. Truman, how many religious people actually won presidency? Because Truman, Eisenhower, Nixon, these people were not religious.
No, not particularly at all. I mean, Eisenhower signed the bill to put the "In God We Trust" on the coins, but he wasn't an overtly religious person.
No.
Yeah. It's easy to call Roosevelt and Hoover. Hoover and Nixon were Quakers. They could not even run for office if they were devout Quakers because of their Quaker religion, but they were not religious.
Yeah, no, it's... But we see this sneaking more and more into politics. If you keep up with politics now, you know that several state legislatures have passed very restrictive laws on the way women can get to an abortion, laws that will probably get rid of the clinics that provide abortions in many states, or at least decrease their efficacy. And these are pushed entirely by the religious right. I mean, it's the Republican legislatures that do it, but the Republicans are controlled to a large extent by the religious fundamentalists these days.
Yeah, they need votes. They have to go to the religious fundamentalists. If they go to common sense and human decency, they can't get the votes, not the Republicans.
No, absolutely.
I think there's going to be a backlash on that. Remember, there was a time when all black people would join the Republican Party because they were civil rights organizers, like up to 1920 or 1930.
That was a totally different Republican Party, for sure.
Yeah, that was very different.
And the Dixiecrats of the 1940s was a different story. And even Lyndon Johnson said, okay, when I sign this legislation, all of the South is going to be Republican. He knew Lyndon Johnson was the most realistic politician I've ever heard of in history of the American people.
Yeah.
He's also the guy who said Vietnam War is ridiculous, but I don't know how the hell to get out of it.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, the current Republican Party is controlled largely by the old Dixiecrats in the South, and they become what I just call the Christo Republicans, or the Christocrats. There's no way around it. I mean, they...
Christocrat seems like a good idea. I mean, a good explanation for what the hell they are.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to backlash on them. Like 20 years from now, or 5 years from now, there's not going to be much of a Republican Party except a 30% opposition to rational people.
Yeah.
Well, I would hope you're right, but you know, sometimes when I look at how the American people think, I just wonder why they do some of the things they do, why they vote some of these guys into office. Anyhow.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit into politics.
Yeah, we don't.
We really shouldn't be going there.
No, we don't want to get there too much.
Well, thank you for your call.
Yeah, Jeffrey, thanks a lot. And
it's Jeff Rick, R-I-C-K.
Jeff Rick. Jeff Rick. Yes,
do you look around Knoxville? I got to ask you this question: do you see banks, new banks listed as TD Bank or CIBC Bank or HSBC Bank?
No, I'm not.
Unless I'm not understanding you correctly. No.
No, really, I'm surprised by that.
Okay,
the Boston Celtics and the Boston Bruins hockey team, they play at the TD Center. That stands for Toronto Dominion. When your banking system went belly up about 4 years ago, the Canadian system did not go belly up, so they went around buying up North American or American banks.
No, they've had a pretty good system up there, but we're going to try to get back on topic here, and you're welcome to call back in later if you'd like to.
Okay. Goodbye for now.
Okay, thanks, Jeffrey. Okay, well, when you think of it, actually, what does the motto "In God We Trust" really means? It seems to be a statement without any content. Who is the we, first of all? It certainly doesn't include the ever-expanding population of secularists, who may be as large as 20% right now. And we maintain in practice it probably doesn't include most Americans, even most professed theists, who go about their daily tasks relying on their own initiative and energy and never really trusting in God to do much for them. So even the Pope rides behind 3 inches of bulletproof glass. Now, if anybody can trust in God, it would seem to be the Pope. But, yeah. And it's the same old query, why do people put lightning rods on church steeples, you know, if they trust in God? So why are we supposed to rely on a supernatural being for which there is no evidence? And exactly what are we supposed to trust this being to do? All we ever get from the Christocrats are vague statements that seem more appropriate to casting a horoscope. The Hobby Lobby advertisement simply embedded the phrase among 150 to 300-year-old quotes from individuals or institutions. Here's one of those quotes. It's supposed to convince people that we Americans trust in God. It comes from the Yale University Student Guidelines of 1787, 225 years ago. Here's the way it reads. All the scholars, that is the students, are required to live a religious and blameless life according to the rules of God's Word, diligently reading the Holy Scriptures, that fountain of light and truth, and constantly attending all duties of religion.
And how much of the knowledge that Yale University has come up with, or its sciences, physical, biological sciences, have actually come from religion?
None.
None.
Absolutely none.
There's an old saying that says, religious scholars are owls that sit on a dead branch of knowledge and keep hooting the same old hoots for centuries. But many of the scientists that made these discoveries may have been religion. But it was not religion per se that dug these facts out of nature. It was a scientific method and science per se. Can anyone imagine that Yale University, one of the top-notch Ivy League schools in America, would subscribe to such a statement as that today? No, and why not? Because one of the university's tasks is advanced knowledge, and knowledge is not a static body of ancient priestly musings, but ever-growing insight into how the natural world and human nature functions. The last 225 years have been witness to the explosive development of the physical and biological sciences that have given us more knowledge about nature than were acquired in all of past human history. Moreover, progress in the so-called higher criticisms of the Bible has shown that the various books were hardly divinely inspired, but were the product of Jewish and Christian preachers trying to solidify their positions.
Yeah.
A role for any kind of God in the universe justifiably seems shrinking as more and more knowledge is gained and more people learn to think critically.
Yeah, and this is very much in the trend that the Hobby Lobby quotes are. So in this vein, it's worth looking at the quote from Thomas Jefferson that the FRF put in their advertisement. He says, "Question with boldness even the existence of God, because if there be one, he must more approve the homage of reason than that of blindfold fear." Score one for the secularists.
To be fair, let's also look at the quote from Jefferson that the Hobby Lobby published. Quote, And can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of these people that these liberties are the gift of God and that they are not to be violated but with his wrath? Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just and that his justice cannot sleep forever. Score one for the theists? Maybe not.
Maybe not. It seems like Jefferson, in that quote that the Hobby Lobby published, is telling Americans they should thank God for their liberties. But let's see what is actually on Jefferson's monument. It says, God who gave us life gave us liberty. Can the liberties of a nation be secure when we have removed the conviction that these liberties are the gift of God? Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just and his justice cannot sleep forever. Commerce between master and slave is despotism. Nothing is more certainly written in the book of fate than that these people are to be free. Establish a law for educating the common people. This is this business of the state on a general plan.
Right. And then another thing we can surmise from this is that the Hobby Lobby was less than honest when it took the quote out of context. One has to wonder about the other statements that they make. And a religion that needs the government to impose it on others is a weak religion at best. Why doesn't the God just enforce the religion? If it's, what was it, Benjamin Franklin said that one that has a religion that has to rely on the strength of the state to support it is, I surmise, is not a good religion.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, the quotes that we had here was a composite.
Yeah, the Jefferson quote from the monument. It's on the Washington Monument.
Okay. There's a composite from different writings, but it's clear that he is saying that slaves should be free. You certainly don't get that impression from the Hobby Lobby newspaper publication. To put it mildly, they are being disingenuous. Not only that, but if you go to their website for their newspaper page, the Jefferson quote doesn't appear at all. I wonder why.
Yeah. Anyhow, one doesn't have much of a case for the role of God in modern American life if he has to rely on views of people from 250 years ago. At that time, there was no good alternative to believing in a supernatural creator who at least set the universe in motion, as the deists believe. And like all political movements, the Founding Fathers had to declare this God was the source of their cause for freedom. But to think that if these astute men were alive today, they would hold the same beliefs about the supernatural as they did 250 years ago seems foolish, given their intellectual levels. It is only the minds enslaved by ancient religious dogma that cannot face modernity.
So true.
And this is why we talk about a growing gap between rich and poor, so as far as economically. But there's also, I see, a growing gap between the people who are mired back in these old religious tenets and people who live in the modern world with science and try to keep up with it. Mm-hmm. Because if you're stuck with these old tenets that don't move, but science is always growing, or knowledge is always growing. So the people who keep up just seem to keep moving away from the fundamentalists.
And it's such a real problem because the very idea of a holy text is it can never change it.
Yeah.
Even if this current society got past those texts and realized that maybe they're not exactly the Word of God, who's to say that 300 years from now we wouldn't have a recurrence of the same fundamentalism because the texts are the same, and we're going to go right back to reading them. New generations will come up, new fundamentalism will start, and we'll have another great awakening, off the same thing, saying that every word in the Bible is true. I think that Jesse Ventura characterized the situation correctly when he was governor of Minnesota, and he gave an interview in which he said, "Organized religion is a sham and a crutch for weak-minded people who need strength in numbers. It tells people to go out and stick their noses in other people's business." The Anderson County Baptists have seemed to determine to prove him correct. In their advocacy for inscribing the motto, "In God We Trust," on the Anderson County courthouse, they effectively demonstrate their personal inability to deal with life in the modern world and must trust to the supernatural. Even worse, they tacitly acknowledge that their God is so weak that they must resort to political muscle to impose it on the rest of us, who we were talking about a little earlier.
Yeah, so Well, it's about time for mid-program break here,
Okay.
and we want to identify our sponsors. And so, Larry, you got that in there?
Yeah. Okay. Well, in case my prompt is not coming up, in case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions. Shows are live most every Tuesday from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern on Community Access TV. You can also see it streaming live online outside the Knoxville area by going to CTV Knox, that's ctvknox.org.
Okay, and remember, this is a call-in show, and we're live today, July 16th, and viewers can call now at the number on the screen, or tweet them to us at FFTVKNOX. Okay.
We have the Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets 2 times a week. We have evening meetups for food, drink, and conversation. ASK's purpose is to supply a venue for community, camaraderie, and outreach to the atheists, agnostics, and freethinkers, and other like-minded persons in the East Tennessee area. Sam, can you run the Ask video, information video?
If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun.
Discussion subjects, topical and timeless. Would you go ahead and run that video, Sam?
Yeah, I already did, I think.
Both of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, as Larry says, the Rationalist has activities several times a month. Once a month we get together for a book club. A couple times a month we have roundtable discussions and presentations. And both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee help provide a social outlet where you'll find that if you don't believe in God, you are not alone. Okay.
Both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee.
I did that.
You already did that.
Yeah, I did that.
Good.
So,
back to
so let's get back to the question of trusting in God. This touches on one of the most vexing problems for theists trying to defend the premise that their God is trustworthy. The problem that evil exists and the supposedly all-powerful and all-loving God of the Christians doesn't seem to care enough to do anything about it. I recently took a 10-hour course in the philosophy of religion a couple months ago, and the instructor spent 3 of those hours on the problem of evil and the excuses used to justifying a God that permits evil. Now, 3 out of 10 courses just on that, when you're doing philosophy of religion, means it's a real burr in the side of the theist. Most of these excuses end up with some flabby justification that God permits evil for some unspecified greater good. And when you try to pin a theist down on this, he usually shrugs his shoulders and whines, "One cannot know the mind of God." If you accept this excuse, then you sure can't trust in a God for much personal help, because you're just an insignificant part of some enterprise that you can't fathom. So I cannot understand. All these scholars over the years have created all these theodicies to justify evil and why God permits evil. And if that's so, you just have to recognize the fact that evil exists and you can't trust God to do anything about it.
And every different theology in the world is just as valid as the Christian one. They all have just as much proof behind it, just as much evidence, which is a holy book.
Yeah.
And if Christianity is true, then all the religions are true. And if they're false, they might as well be all false, because there's not any evidence to back any of them up other than the scriptures themselves, which is really just anecdotal evidence.
Right, exactly, because as we said before, the people who wrote these things down 2,500 years ago or so, they had no idea of how the world works. They were totally ignorant. They were trying to make up a story that would give, in the case of Christianity or Judaism, give those people a background that they thought they could trace from the beginning of the world up and to that time. And
every society has a different story. Every culture.
Every culture has a different story. Every culture, different creation stories. I think some of the American Indian creation stories are really more fun in a lot of ways.
Yeah. But we're not going to just choose one of those stories and say that one's true when there's no evidence to back any of them up.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you know, as we said before, I guess you can't stop an individual from believing what he wants to believe, but we just don't like having them impose it on the rest of society.
Especially with the power of government behind it.
Yeah.
Does the motto that we trust the God to keep our citizens well fed and housed? Well, in 2010, approximately 1 in 7 households were deemed to be food insecure. On any given night in America, anywhere from 700,000 to 2 million people are lying homeless. Many of them are veterans. So there's no reason to trust a God to prevent hunger or homelessness. How about trusting a God to keep America safe from harm? That doesn't seem to be an area to which God pays much attention. Hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods claim the lives of thousands every year.
Yeah, and in fact, it was very amusing in that tornado, recent tornado, I think in Oklahoma, that Wolf Blitzer interviewed this woman and asked her, did she thank God for keeping her safe? And she said, well, no, I'm an atheist. Right. And it took him aback, you know. He didn't know quite what to do, a little bit of nervous chuckle on that. And then, of course, Glenn Beck, another, well, I don't want to say a propagandist for religion, comes along and says, well, some atheist producer planted her in there, you know, put her on. Now,
well, it's got to be a conspiracy.
Yeah, everything has to be a conspiracy. So I don't know how you get people to realize that there actually are atheists who think that, you know, God didn't save them, and realize that the other people right around her were killed, and God didn't bother doing anything with them. I don't know why Wolf Blitzer asked, why didn't God kill you and save them? Because most of those were probably good Christians.
It tends to generate a blame the victim mentality too, because these people obviously weren't good as this person because they got killed, or their houses were blown down. This person didn't, so they must be a good person. They must be living right. These people are bad people.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, another aspect, say, of trusting in God. Just the last few months, a deranged killer took the lives of, 22 kids and teachers at Sandy Hook shooting spree. 2 brothers, motivated by religion, killed and maimed several people at the Boston Marathon. And since the Sandy Hook catastrophe, more U.S. citizens have been killed by guns than have died throughout the 10 years of the Iraq War. I mean, I find that absolutely mind-boggling, and that you can't even get Christians to stand up for some sort of, you know, restrictions on who can buy guns, or some sort of identification being necessary.
Yeah. It's like they care more about their gun than their own life.
Yeah. So if God is supposed to be shielding us from danger, it is grossly underperforming, I would maintain, and cannot be trusted. On the other hand, if the job is to shield the gun lobby from any restrictions on firearms, maybe the God's doing great. So maybe the gun lobby can trust him but the average citizen can't.
Yeah. Getting back to the tornadoes and hurricanes and floods and all this, the theist has to be sitting around scratching his head saying, why? Why would God allow this person to die? Why would God allow this person's home to burn or be blown down? Or why would he allow the good person to be killed? When the atheist realizes these are just natural causes. These are things that happen because of the normal heating and cooling of the Earth's surface over years and over periods of years. And it's not something that we have a problem with, because it's readily and easily understood. If you don't believe in supernatural entities that theoretically are taking responsibility for these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have the we understand how earthquakes are caused. They're not caused by gods. We understand how hurricanes arise and how they build up power, even though we may not be able to predict precisely where or how.
These particular Christians would laugh at a South Sea Islander who said the volcano was blowing up because their totem poles wanted it to blow up.
Yeah.
But in this culture, they say we got a hurricane because of the way the country's treating the gays. God's mad at us.
Yeah, I think we have another call there.
Okay.
So you want?
Welcome to Freethought Forum. You're on the air. May we have a name or a nickname, please?
Yeah. Well, God, I can't think of a good nickname.
I'm sorry, I can't hear your name.
Bob.
Bob. Okay, welcome to the show, Bob. Do you have a comment or question?
Well, your question on the screen is, what use is God?
That's what we're talking about, yes.
Well, I think it's rather obvious, starting with Constantine, actually. Do you recall Constantine? He was trying to administer an empire that was full of pagans and a rising group of Christians.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, the reason what Constantine wanted to do was to unify his country, or his lands, his empire. And you cannot do that when people are thinking independently or thinking fragmentedly. For example, if you've got pagans, they're worshiping all different kinds of weird gods. And it's hard to get them under one banner. Mm-hmm. However, when you pick a single god or a single entity, well, then you can concentrate on one.
Yeah, but that's a good pragmatic reason. Of course, it really has nothing to do with whether that God's going to protect you or not. But I understand.
No, it doesn't. But what your question up there is, what use is God?
Yeah, but even then, let's say that all of America was indeed a Christian nation. We have Catholics, we have Protestants, we have Church of Christ, we have Church of God. We've got, let's say that we had one God, but all of a sudden, over the course of time, it splinters and splinters until we have theoretically one God under name, but then we have 10,000 gods under belief.
Well, perhaps I'm not making myself plain.
Oh, I understand. I understand.
What I mean is what use is God is, if you want to control the people, you get their God belief down to a single point as you possibly can. Mm-hmm. With Constantine, he used Jesus, and then he was the one that created the sign of the cross, which is supposed to be a sword sticking down into the ground. Now, then what did you have happen with Muhammad? He did the same thing. You have a single entity that he was able to converge all of the people living in the Arab areas, or to convert them by the sword or whatever, to, again, a single entity. Now, as far as our situation goes, again, what use is God? Well, as Napoleon says, God is nothing more, or religion is nothing more than politically expedient. So if you're going to be a politician, then you know exactly what the answer is to what use is God, and that is to control the people. And in our last election, half of the candidates for the Republican presidency said that God had picked them to run for the presidency. So if you want to find a use for God, it's to control all the stupid Republicans.
You gotta kind of wonder why God would pick them. half of them to run for president and then pick the same half to drop out, basically.
Yeah, and
Didn't he know?
of course, the same half that dropped out were the half that don't believe in evolution.
Oh, wait a second. Y'all are making a terrible mistake.
We are.
You are trying to think rationally about things that are happening with the Republicans, and that is just futile.
Yeah.
Vanity. It is vanity.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
what the Republicans do is they want to get their people on board with every stupid little thing from abortion to whether prayer should be said in school, and then after that, slip the taxes and whatever other laws they want in on them, to or gerrymandering in order to maintain their power. So, what use is God? God is the Republicans' plaything.
Well, it's a political organizing principle, we'll say. We won't put it onto any one party.
It has
here.
always worked well.
It has always worked well among a certain group of people, and so
You mean Republicans?
No, I'm
conservatives,
going to say throughout history. You just brought up the point about Constantine, and we may
Napoleon.
and maybe Napoleon. You have parties today, and of course, when you see a slogan like "In God We Trust," it's no more meaningful than the Nazi Wehrmacht, who had "Gott mit uns," God with us, engraved on their belt buckles. Mm-hmm. It's the same type of thing.
Well, no, it's not
It is.
meaningful to a supernatural deity. I thought that would be obvious. No, it's meaningful to the people that you want kissing your ass.
Well, I think that
I mean, when a president gets up
think
and
you- I
says,
think when you-
talk to God,
Yeah.
and that God is going to tell me when to go to war with Iraq and not you, well, something's bad wrong.
Well, yeah, and we absolutely agree with that. And that's just another example of why you can't trust God, because he tells some people the wrong things.
He tells them whatever they want to hear in their own mind.
Again, I do not understand this. I do not understand the statement, you cannot trust God, because there's no God
can't-
there to
There's no
trust.
God.
I'm sorry. I'm using this, in a euphemistically way, that those people who hear God are going to do what he tells them. And the rest of us really can't trust that God is going to tell him to do the right
Ralph,
thing.
do you really think that President Bush heard God tell him to go to war with Iraq?
Absolutely.
You do?
Absolutely.
So you are...
God told him.
Uh-huh. You don't think there's any possibility that it was just hearing voices while he was in a cocaine-empowered drunk?
He could have been, but that was the God he was listening to.
Okay,
Yeah.
well...
Who's
now,
to say that
makes
most of these
sense.
gods don't come from that kind of influence? Or at least originated that way.
Yeah.
Jimmy Buffett sang about being God's own drunk when you reach a certain stage of inebriation.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I just want to answer that question. What good is God? And it's good for a politician.
I think you made an excellent point there.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Thanks
All
for the
right.
call.
Well, I'll get off here and let that raving person that usually calls and ring the phone.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Does putting trust in God mean that it will provide guidance to steering the country in ways that will make the nation safer? That doesn't seem to work very well either. Our born-again President George Bush was convinced that the Jesus God was guiding him, but apparently the Jesus God didn't know what he was doing. If Bush was correct about the guidance, Jesus told him to ignore the warning signs of Al-Qaeda from the previous administration, then to start a war with the fabricated stories about weapons of mass destruction, a war that killed and displaced hundreds of thousands of people, which has probably cost the United States about $1 trillion and put us in the deficit that we are now. Bush's God is certainly not a God to be trusted.
Yeah, I think we have another caller here. Hello, caller. You're on Freethought Forum. Can you give us a name or a nickname?
Well, hello, this is Faithless Forrest.
Oh, we got Faithless with us.
Hello, Forrest.
And I was motivated by the discussion with the previous caller a little bit. So he was kind of talking about how God is useful to tyrants, which is a different way to use that phrase that is your question. Obviously, the way the Hobby Lobby was trying to talk about God was that it somehow was tied in with the founding of our nation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to point out something, and that is that when our nation was founded, even before our Constitution, first Congress that was acting when we were an independent, after we declared ourselves independent, created a new flag for our nation, a symbol, and it's radically different than the flag of most European countries, in particular, and specifically the flag of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom's flag has a vertical and horizontal white stripe. That's called the Cross of St. George. It's a Christian symbol. And then it's got a white X that goes diagonally, left and right, right and left. That's called the Cross of St. Andrews. When our flag was invented after our independence, the Congress wrote, I have to paraphrase here, that it would be red and white stripes and a field of blue with 13 stars representing a new constellation that has appeared. And there's nothing Christian-like about any of that symbology. It's a complete break with all of what went before.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, certainly. And
the whole American experience was a complete break over the kings and pontiffs that went before.
yeah,
If it was true that we were somehow a Christian nation, if that was the intention of the founders, you'd have thought they'd have maybe worked a cross in there. Now, of course, whether our founders were 100% Christian and all thought that Jehovah was real, of course, still has no bearing on the reality of Jehovah. We can be pretty sure that most ancient Egyptians thought that, Osiris and those other gods were real, and they built all those monuments, but that has no bearing on the reality of it.
Yeah, and as I pointed out before, one thing that really bothers me about people who try to justify the U.S. as a Christian nation is that they will put out quotes from these people who are the founders. And as I say, you're talking 250 years ago or so, and to think that those people would have the same ideas today as they did back then, because I say most of these people were pretty astute. And they in fact embraced modern science because some of them thought it was the way to understand God better. It was certainly the way to understand nature better.
And even the ones who were, quote, believers in God was not necessarily the Christian God, and they did not embrace Christianity, particularly Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson, who was
Ben Franklin,
John Adams.
John Adams, yeah.
And Madison. Madison wrote one of the most scathing attacks on Christianity to date.
Sure enough. Hey, it's getting kind of late in the program. Let me sign out. I hope you get a few more interesting calls.
Okay.
I hope to see you at Barley's after the meeting, everyone. Bye for now.
Okay.
Now, I had one more thought to throw in there about trusting God / Jesus. Remember, God and Jesus are supposedly the same person, and they're supposedly aware of everything that goes on in the world, and they exist everywhere.
Yeah.
They're aware of every crime against an innocent prior to the fact. In American justice, if we are aware of a crime that was going to take place and did nothing about it, we would be considered an accessory before the fact. In criminal law, contributing to or aiding in the commission of a crime, and this includes foreknowledge, one who, without being present at the commission of the crime, becomes guilty of such an offense, not as a chief actor, but as a participant, and as by command, advice, instigation, or concealment, either before or after the fact of commission. In other words, if you were there and did nothing, if you knew about it and did nothing, you're guilty of a crime. But as we all know, since God is supposedly everywhere at once, God is theoretically present at the commission of every crime with foreknowledge of that crime. Instead of an image of Christ that many Christians have taking care of the innocent, taking care of soldiers in the field, taking care of children. The image that they should have in their head is one perhaps Jesus standing in every room where a child is being beaten, starved, sexually assaulted, or shot, like in these schools that we've been seeing recently, and doing absolutely nothing. That seems to me the more likely scenario if he in fact exists, because he's certainly not doing anything about it.
Yeah, and just another instance of why you can't trust in the God. So, we have another caller.
Okay.
All right. Hello, caller. You're on the air on Freethought Forum. Would you care to give us a name or a nickname?
Sure. My name's Richard. Thanks for taking my call.
Richard, we only have a few minutes, about 3 minutes. Can we have a quick comment or question?
Sure, I'll try to be as brief as I can.
All right.
It's what uses God. It's the one caller was correct. It's been used and manipulated quite a bit by politicians and popes and so forth like that for the use of power to influence power over people. Mm-hmm. And I subscribe somewhere between some of Frank R. Walsey's works. I don't know if you're familiar with him. That's the God-man theory, and what I will call the great truth, for lack of a better explanation. That is simply that something can't come from nothing. And I know some people say, well, the Big Bang, that still implies energy, so there's something there. Bottom line is something can't come from nothing. For now, I personally will call that something God. Now, you can call him a frog leg, a frying pan, or whatever else you want to call him, but for now, that's where I stand. And I'll leave you with make whatever comments you will. Enjoy your program.
Okay, thanks for the call.
Thanks very much for the call. And we are going to do a program on this business of why is there something rather than nothing.
Can something come from nothing?
And, yeah, it's exactly what you mean by nothing, etc. But you can't answer it in just a couple minutes. And when are we scheduled to do that?
August 13th.
August 13th, we're going to have a program on that, and I'll try to point out to you exactly why there, globally in the universe, there really is no matter and energy.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you should give your credentials at this point.
Well, my credentials are I'm a physicist, partially retired, and I think that I've tried to keep up pretty much on what the science is over the last few decades, although I don't work in that field. But I can just briefly tell you that if you take all the matter in the universe, the normal matter, the dark energy that's causing space to expand, it gets canceled out by the gravitational energy, which goes into that sum as a negative quantity. And I can't explain that to you in just the minute that I have here right now, but if you tune in on our program there on August 13th, we'll try to do that in some detail.
Okay, and we certainly respect your right to believe anything you want to. We would just hope that you'd want to believe as much true things and as few false things as possible to make your life more in tune with the natural world. So if you would, we've got, if you can rewind this show and start it from the beginning, we talked about many of the reasons why we really shouldn't have grounds to trust any God. If you get a chance to do that, I don't know if you've seen it from the beginning or not, but we covered a lot of points that may help you think about it a little bit. Yeah,
and that of course is a little different from what he was bringing up. Sure. He's talking about God the creator, not the God as the interactor.
But then he was also saying that
I think I just made up a word. Yeah.
He was going to pick the story that he wanted to believe.
Yeah, well, okay, well, we've only got about a minute to go, and it's time to start wrapping things up. So get out your pen and paper.
Okay, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee.
And please send us feedback. Leave voicemail at 865-272-9060 or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
We do take voicemail at that particular phone number. It transcribes this and sends it to us. We can get back to you as soon as we get it or right afterwards.
Right.
You can see this show here on this cable channel every Tuesday from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock Eastern Time.
Yeah, and we want to thank all our callers for calling in, and we hope those of you who have watched the show, maybe the whole show or at least part of the show, will watch us again and get in touch with us later. Our thanks to Sam, Jonas, technical help, and staff at CTV